Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 105. My guest in this episode is Dr. Trevor Peterson. He's a professor of psychology at Oregon Tech, as well as being a licensed clinical psychologist. And he's published a book called Overlap: The Heart of Happiness, an evidence-based recipe for joy, meaning, and life satisfaction. So I very much enjoyed meeting Dr. Peterson and having this conversation with him, and I hope there's good takeaway for you, and I very much appreciate you joining us as an observer of this conversation. Thank you. I'd like to welcome Dr. Trevor Peterson to the IdeaCast interview series. We're going to talk about a book that he published called Overlap: The Heart of Happiness. And there's more to it, but I'll keep it brief for the introduction.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Dr. Peterson, welcome. So glad to have you on my show and looking forward to a really great conversation with you.
Thanks for having me, Justin. I'm excited about this.
Yeah. When I think we found each other on a third-party platform, and I was looking at your work, and I watched one of your talks that you had given, and I thought, wow, this really resonates with the direction I like to flow in with meaning making and things like that. So yeah, it's great to be able to sit down with you and have a chat. And your book is called Overlap, and I think we're going to explore your thesis project or your scheme that you have set up here, which I think is really brilliant.
Right.
To the YouTube audience, first of all, welcome. And in talking about Trevor's book, I will say that this book is very accessible. It is well laid out, well thought out. There are diagrams in there. It's just a really good, kind of like a handbook, I would say. From my perspective, it's just a handbook, but much more. So let's go ahead and I almost want to go down like a sort of beginning of the book and talk about some of the things that you open with. And one thing I noted in reading through the chapters is that you use yourself as a case example or an anecdotal example of what a lot of us go through and what a lot of us are questioning and sense making and trying to discover for ourselves in our lives. So let's talk about in the beginning for you, and I think it resonates, across the board, in trying to seek happiness and some of the dead ends that you found in that journey and that exploration or inquiry. So let's start with that dead ends aspect of happiness seeking, and what your discovery was, and it'll probably
Yeah,
resonate with everyone.
absolutely. Yeah, so I was really shy kid growing up, highly introverted, and that really inhibited me from speaking. Remember even struggling to smile for pictures for whatever reason, forming relationships and connections. And so, yeah, I always felt a little different, a little weird, kind of like an outsider. Everyone else seemed to have it figured out, and I was the one that was struggling. And so, yeah, from just a really early age, I kind of had this informal quest to figure out happiness. And it wasn't even happiness, it was just to feel less miserable, I guess, to figure out how to be like other people who seem to be doing fine and enjoying life more. And so, I think I had tried the typical things, right, that we hear about, tried pleasure. Maybe if I just fill my life with pleasure, I'll find, deeper significance, or I'll find some sort of satisfaction that I'm missing. And for me, I loved eating food, donuts, ice cream, whatever I could, get my
Yeah.
hands on. And that, it's fortunately it didn't work so well, right? We satiate pretty quickly to pleasure. There's this hedonic treadmill that kind of just pulls us back to where we started. Our brain gets accustomed to that stimulus. And so possessions, I was quite a collector. I collected Legos, and I actually collected animals for a while. I had like a zoo in my room. And again, possessions are fun for a short time, but they tend to become tools.
Hmm.
Even recently I've bought a car, bought a phone, thinking, oh, this will be great. And nope.
Yeah.
Within a few weeks, it's like, it's just another tool.
Yeah.
And a big thing for me, I was kind of a perfectionist, and so like the next great achievement was another kind of path I thought would lead to happiness. If I can just achieve something great, then
Hmm.
I'll be satisfied. And I found that the moment I would maybe get good grades in high school, and then I would just immediately change the goal marker and think, well, I got to get into the right college, and I got to get straight A's in college, or I've got to get into grad school, and then I got to get an internship, and then I got to get my first job, and then I got to get tenured. And so the problem with that was that I quickly realized, if I don't ever stop and celebrate life, I'm just postponing, happiness, and that's the temptation of just always looking to some other bigger thing.
Mm-hmm.
Fame, fortune, being the most beautiful, those were maybe slightly tempting to me, but also dead ends. They don't yield, the joy, meaning, the life satisfaction that I was really after. And so, yeah, through personal experience, I found those to not be fruitful in trying to gain something more. And by happiness, I do define that as, regular joy, significant meaning, and enhanced life satisfaction. Not just, be having a bubbly personality. It's these deeper, more significant things where we're truly thriving.
Mm-hmm. Speaks to a kind of sort of not an intolerance, but habituation leads to a tolerance, I guess. That like you said, it's a hedonic treadmill, and how capable are we of recognizing that and stepping out of that and saying, oh, okay, I see the pattern here, and I see the fact that this is not satisfying me in a deeper sense. So
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to start out this idea, this journey to what led you to the idea of overlap. And in your book, you define overlap. And I have to read the note that I wrote because I don't want to misspeak, even though you're here to correct me. Represents the convergence of diverse wisdom, and so a coalescence of these trajectories of wisdom, or paths of wisdom that and as you say, it's not that it's hierarchical or it's prescriptive in a dogmatic sense, that it has to be handled with as needed, or a fluidity that they can work with each other. And in your outlining your ideas in the book, I love that you included personal like reflections or notes, and that to me as a reader would help me to say, oh yes, okay, so I'm taking the same thing away, or yes, this, now I understand. It's helping me to sort of reify that connection with what you were saying. So I appreciate that you were doing that. So I tried to I parroted your definition of overlap, but let me have you speak to it and do justice to it as a better, not just such a coarse-grained definition.
Yeah. My early kind of quest for happiness, did became formalized, I should say, at some point, where I, got a degree in psychology and then pursued clinical psychology and started studying positive psychology, the science of happiness, really trying to nail down, okay, what have others discovered, and looking at different cultures around the world, and, not just the science, but, the wisdom of cultures and philosophers and all of that. And so my hope was to, in the end, kind of distill it all down to the underlying mechanism by which happiness is created. I was hoping there'd be some way to actually create this,
Yeah.
Not just it be a whim or something that we just happen upon, but that we could actually be intentional about. And so it was kind of this synthesizing process that kind of led to what really became like a really simple thing. And it kind of surprised me initially when, like, I think this is it. I think this is kind of at the bottom of it all. And this is kind of what fuels it, the active ingredient. And so maybe the easiest way to explain it is through an analogy. I think we talked previously about this, but as I was trying to make this clean and clear, because I think it's kind of can be abstract, but one of the cleanest ways to explain it is just with a beach analogy. And as a kid, I actually flew to Florida to visit my uncle with my family, and I remember being so excited, and we saved up all this money to do this big trip, and we get there, we're on the Florida Keys, pull over off the highway on this beach, and I started noticing some different groups, and I was a little bit shocked, actually, given the sacrifice we've made. And the first group was just these people that just kept zooming by on the highway, and I was naive youth, but it was like, what's going on there? They're just passing by this beautiful beach, and they were just, moving on. So that was group number one. The second group was those who had parked, and they were sitting on the beach, put up their umbrella in their chair, watching, spectating and observing other people playing in the water, the waves. And they were having, seemed like a more interesting experience. And then there was a third group who were just kind of walking along the edge of the water, waiting, right? Dabbling, starting to get their feet wet, starting to touch the ocean, and engaging at a little bit higher level. And then the final group were those who were out a ways. They put on the gear, scuba diving, snorkeling gear. They swam out, they dove underneath, they immersed themselves in this new world of just wonder and awe. You know, there's just reefs teeming with planet animal life. I'd never seen anything like it. It was like life-changing for me, just like, oh my goodness, this exists down here, you know, and
Yeah.
just to be able to connect and learn and to kind of commune with these all these living things was just mind-blowing and so fulfilling for me.
Hmm.
And that's kind of where I had, you know, later in life had this epiphany, like maybe that's where it's at, right? There's these 4 levels of engagement with life. We could probably break them up more, but there's passing. We just pass by living things. We miss opportunities to live.
Hmm.
We spectate. We kind of watch maybe others living, others doing things, and you know we can do this very easily now through reality TV shows or social media. You know, follow other people on Instagram, see them do interesting trips and have interesting relationships. But we're just watching, right? And then we can dabble where we're starting to connect, like we're sitting on the couch with our partner, they're on their phone, we're on their phone, and we're really just doing things in parallel, but we're not actually connecting and growing together. And then there's that final one, which I call overlap. The deepest level of engagement with life might be the simplest definition, where we dive down, we connect, we commune, there's a give and take, and it can be this kind of life-changing experience. And as I've looked at the research from, you know, all these positive psychologists who've been studying thriving for, you know, many, many years, that seems to be at the heart of it, right? There's clear research that says quality relationships are the best predictor of physical health, mental health, and life satisfaction. And so then it becomes, well, what creates a quality relationship?
Hmm.
It seems to be overlap. And there's a lot of barriers to overlap, which maybe we'll get to. And it's not easy to do, right? It can be
Yeah.
very challenging, especially interpersonally, to overlap or with wisdom or with other things that are living. And by living things, I just mean anything with vitality, anything with energy, you know, anything that offers affordances for connection, that provides gifts in return, you know, and that could be comfort or wisdom or growth or learning, you know, it can be love, all sorts of things can come. So, you know, plants can be living things, nature, our pets, definitely people are highly living. And so there's kind of a spectrum of living things from very low living, maybe like a rock, to like highly living, like a human being who's ready and willing to have a deep conversation with us.
Hmm. Hmm. And I think when you talk about that living, that there is in those 4 steps that the living becomes more alive, and the reciprocity of that relationality or relationship. It really, I like that. That really stood out for me. That there is this yeah, like a reciprocity that goes on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something really to that. You know, there's kind of some laws that seem to exist with overlap. And the first one is that what we value does take on more life. And it
Mm.
becomes a more living thing with which we can, you know, overlap and experience that joy and meaning and life satisfaction. And so that's a huge thing is, you know, thinking about, do I value what's around me? Do I even see life, you know, in these things? And, you know, an example in my life was birding. You know, like I could care less about birds for most of my life. It was just a shadow in a tree, meant nothing, no significance. Until a friend said, "Hey, have you ever gone birding?" They're like, "What's birding?" He's like, "Well, it's like bird watching, but you also listen, so that's why it's birding." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll give it a try." You know, we went out. The first time, you know, it didn't really resonate. But then he's like, "Hey, no, take these binoculars. Like, really look at that bird. It's magnificent." And so I looked. I'm like, "Oh my goodness! Like, look at the colors and the, you know, and the textures and its interesting behavior, and you know, zooming in and
Hmm.
really seeing it up close, just amazing, right?" And I started to, and then he's like, "Well, have you read about birds? You know, some of their superpowers. You know, these birds can fly across the entire world, and these birds, you know, have like better memories than humans do, and these birds, you know, can solve multi-step, you know, problems." And so I started to be like, "Oh, there's some value to birds." And the more I learned, the more I valued, and then I got more joy out of them. When I would go on a walk, it's like, "Oh my goodness, let me see what's out there." And then I was just surrounded by all this life that I never knew was even there, all this diversity.
Wow. And when you're saying that, there's a CogSci guy that I follow, and he has this thing called relevance realization. And I think that you're saying that, and he probably has a different definition of relevance realization. It's a very deep, profound definition. But I'm seeing that in what you're saying, and that the more that you open up and your salience opens up to birding or whatever it is, you know, for me it might be plants or palms or whatever I'm into. That the more that you expose yourself to that, and the more that universe opens up to you,
Yeah.
that affect then or the relationship deepens and broadens, and yeah, that's just so powerful when you can have access to that And is that does that come naturally to us, or is that something that has to be cultivated, do you think? To even have that basic desire, that impulse to go and become a birder. Like you said, you know, there's a time where you did things in the tree, and then and for me it was, you know, green things around me and whatever. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
how does that is that personality, or is that cultivated, or what do you think kicks that off for us?
Yeah, I think, some of it is probably personality. We
Okay.
think of the big five personality traits. There's that openness to new
Oh yeah,
experience.
yeah, yeah. In the ocean scale.
Yeah, in the ocean. Yeah. And
Or
so that
canoe.
some of us are a little higher. So some of us be very closed off to new experiences. I'm just going to do it the way I've always done.
Mm,
I'm going to keep to the group that I know, keep to the path I always walk. And that could
hmm.
limit opportunities for overlap or limit our valuing of other things. But I do think from children tend to just naturally be a little more curious, and they tend to go outside and sometimes have fun for hours. And you're like, how could a kid go in this little backyard? Well, it's because they're overlapped, right? They have enough curiosity, they have enough value where they're going to turn over rocks. And they're like, oh my goodness, they'll find like 10 different insects and look at them and play with them and learn about them and watch them and get the roly polies and collect them, and just have this wonderful experience. The same experience I had going to the ocean, they could have
Yeah.
in their own backyard if they value even little things like insects, or they really look at a leaf and its formation and the veins and um or there's other things we could talk about later, but just being playful, like actually being willing to connect with the things that do this, like to climb the tree. That's climbable for an adult too, but we don't see enough value to see the
Mm.
affordance that it's offering us. Like as an adult, I could go climb that tree too, and I could get up really high and I could see over my neighborhood with this whole new perspective and have quite an experience. But somehow as we mature, we think that's immature to do perhaps, and so we start to cut off these opportunities to connect and overlap with. And sometimes we're too busy for our pets. We don't climb trees anymore. We don't. When we go to the park, we let our kids play basketball, but we just sit there and watch. And we go to the pool, but too old to go get in. I'll just let my kids swim and I'll just watch. And then we're spectating again, and we're pulling back
Mm.
from living life. We're not engaging with our kids and with the other opportunities that are afforded.
That speaks to an overlap process. Again, I'm imagining while you're talking, that I'll use myself, that I, as the 54-year-old person, uh, may be inhibited from going from the passerby to the maybe more attuned spectator. In other words, I could try to imagine being a young person full of wonder, but not
Yeah,
really acting on it, and then maybe being drawn in a little bit more and getting my feet wet a little bit, and sort of with some inhibition, to enter into
yeah,
that childlike state of wonder. And then there's adults, and I would love to think I could do it, that can just go deep into the reef of the metaphor
yeah.
that you used earlier and be that child, like you said, climb the tree at 50 something years old, with all necessary caveats,
Sure, sure.
because
Be
you weigh
careful.
more, right? You'll go to the
Yeah,
hospital faster with a poor
yeah,
broken bones.
that's true.
But yeah, I'm seeing the overlap in that it applies also to sort of a retrospective uh, enjoyment of your life, where you can say, oh my gosh, yeah, when I was 14 or 12, and everything was wide open and my imagination was not inhibited by the treachery of adult life.
Yeah,
That really that speaks to your thesis, and it speaks to this idea of the overlap.
yeah. And the cool thing is even though we may feel like we're maturing out of going and playing in the backyard, we actually, if we are humble enough or willing enough to give it a try again, like we bring so much with us as an adult, like so much wisdom, and so to where now we can see a complexity in nature, let's say, that we couldn't see before because we know more, we have more to bring, we have more sensitive eye at times. And so I did this with my kids one time. We were like, let's just go see how many insects we can find in our own yard, right? And so
Hmm.
we went out and we kind of divided into groups, just as kind of a fun activity, and it was a competition. And in like 40 minutes, I don't remember, we found over 50 insects, I think,
Oh
right? And,
wow.
and so we took pictures and we tried to figure out what they were, and I just it was really exciting because now I had like I knew now like how to like learn what about these insects, where to go, where to search, and my kids knew most of that too, but I had a level of kind of awareness and appreciation and interest. I could go kind of read even more substantial information about some of the cool, features or abilities of these insects, and which ones are really rare, which ones aren't, and it was very compelling. Or another time we were, and our kids probably more initiated this than we did, but I was with a friend and our kids, and we were riding our bikes past a lake, going back to our campsite. and there's this cement ramp down into the lake. And I think it was the kids that said, let's try down that and see what happens, you know.
Oh no.
And so, you know, as an adult, I never probably would have thought of that. We're like, okay, let's do it. You know, we already had our swim trunks on, we've been swimming. And so we went, you know, at really high speeds into this water, and
Oh my gosh.
it just led to these huge like wings of like water flying up on the side. You know, the bike went really fast, and there at a point it slowed it down and like threw us over, you know, the handlebars into the water. You know, it was deep enough at that point, it wasn't dangerous. But you know, and then you know, as an adult, I'm like, okay, what's the physics behind it? How does the water do that? And like,
Right.
you know, why do we suddenly start, you know, and it was actually almost more fun than maybe even the kids, because I was really thinking about the physics and some of the complexities that allow this to even happen, and that water can, you know, create these amazing shapes. And so I think there's some, you know, there's just some fun, a lot of fun that we can glean from overlap as an adult if we really apply our brain to it.
And so I'm going to be a little tangential here for a second. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier this afternoon, and I was parroting some things that I'd heard from other profound deep thinkers about what leads to transcendence in us as acting agents and so forth. And for me, I'll define transcendence as being fairly mundane compared to what we've, you know, it's not a religious experience. It's more moving into a more positive state. And so what you're talking about with going down the ramp and devil may care and just, you know, seeing what happens, that it's the two things that I've taken from other people is that ritual can lead to transcendence and disruption can lead to transcendence. And in there was ritual and disruption. Normally you don't think about hopping on a bike and just crashing into a wall of water for fun, but that disruption afforded you that opportunity for you as an adult to lens it in a sense of wonder, like, oh my gosh, you know, look at this water cascading and coming up in a rooster tail or whatever. And the kids are like, yay, we're doing something really crazy and wild and it's fun. But that's a ritual. That is, you can keep doing it over again and just have this, again, this happiness moment, this positive affect that arises from that. So I know that's a tangent, but I'm going to throw that in there because for me, that just speaks to I want to reinforce what you're saying with overlap. In the way I'm trying to lens it through ritual equals perhaps a moment for that fleeting transcendent experience that you can take away, and then there it is, you know, stored in the heart space or wherever, you know, we want to call it. So anyway, thank you for indulging my tangent.
Absolutely, I agree. You know, I think there's a transcendence when we, you know, overlap's all about connecting with the living thing that's outside of us. And that, you know, I think there's a spiritual component to that, right? I mean, I think a lot of people say their spirituality is when they connect with something beyond themselves, whether it's another person or nature. And so I think in that regard, absolutely, that's where there's also a very like practical component to overlap. You know, thinking about like the positive psychology research in the science of thriving is that the reason why it increases our joy is because joy is a primary emotion that is a message when we've met a need, physical need, psychological need, you know, personal need. And so overlap just provides this like rich opportunity to meet a whole bunch of psychological needs all at once. You know, so if you've been lonely and you had a difficult day, and then you're able to sit down with your partner at night and just have a deep conversation and share and get some, you know, perspective back, some feedback and some support and some love and a hug, you know, like that type of deep engagement with a partner is meeting all sorts of psychological needs for connection, which is maybe our most fundamental need of all, you know, psychological need for like growth. You know, we've learned, we've developed a little bit from that feedback or the advice they've given us. So some growth there, some need for some variety, right? When we overlap, there's all sorts of variety that we experience that we just wouldn't if we just passed by. You know, there's this complexity that emerges that we would have missed, this diversity. So we have this need for variety is met, right? Some often our need to contribute, like we have a deep-seated need to nurture as social animals. And so, you know, there's something we can give and bring to a relationship when we overlap deeply that fulfills that need. So it's just kind of this really cool moment where it's very practical. It's like, okay, like here's a way to just meet a whole bunch of psychological needs all at once, and joy will come as a signal. Ding, 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 ding. Great job. You met a need. Do it again. You know, and joy doesn't stay forever. It comes and signals and it leaves, but it'll come back if we go and meet another psychological need. So if we're meeting our psychological needs throughout the day, no wonder we're going to experience a lot of fulfillment because we've just fulfilled multiple needs. And so joy has continued to come to remind us, great job, you know, do it again. You know, seek this seek this rewarding thing again. And it's more than pleasure, right? It's like a deeper need that we're fulfilling. So
Yeah, yeah. And as social creatures, that's key. And in your speaking to that, I was intuiting as re in reading your book, and I think you even had a diagram where there's almost this iterative or nested doll effect of overlap, and that there are other overlaps that are in maybe a broader there's a general context, and then there may be other phenomena of overlapping that so it's this radiation thing going on there. That's I believe that was one of the diagrams you have. And so again, my intuition speaks to a little bit about what you just said, and that if you can really open up this as a utility or as a praxis to engage with in life, that you start your again salient, you start to see overlaps within overlaps. And so
yeah,
maybe I'm getting a little out there, but yeah, that's something that I was taking
yeah,
away is that if you practice this, that you recognize the reciprocity or whatever is going on,
yeah,
this iterative phase that's going on. So that I thought that was really neat too, that's something you can maybe intentionally or otherwise come to experience in this discipline or
mhm,
this praxis again that you speak
yeah.
to. So
I,
that was
I absolutely agree with that. There's just kind of this, analogy again that you can imagine if you're like this little pale yellow circle.
mm,
Um, we might be very comfortable being that circle, living inside that comfort zone, you could say. And yet, with time, right, that can kind of lead to stagnation where we actually are malnourished. We're not meeting our psychological needs anymore because we're staying too safely inside a comfort zone that doesn't allow us to connect and meet those needs. And so, at some point, we have to risk expansion to. And as that paleo circle kind of expands, maybe initially we don't connect with much, and so it doesn't seem like it's maybe even worth it. But eventually we will. We'll overlap with other circles, and maybe a red circle, maybe an orange circle, green and blue, and then it's like paint colors that like there's just this mixing that happens, and then we're suddenly introduced to the mixture, of those two colors,
yeah.
and as it expands and connects with more, and those mix and overlap, then you're exactly right. It just becomes this more diversified, more beautiful, just bouquet, of
Hmm.
diverse colors, and this richness enters our life. So it's overlaps about enriching our life, and again, like you said, not in ways that are crazy or dangerous, but in ways that are intentional and that can be gradual, but that just enrich and add more substance. And the cool thing, I guess I should say this early on, because I do think any sort of conversation on happiness sometimes can feel like a lot of fluff. So the cool thing
Right.
about like positive psychology is that it's actually has high utility.
Mm.
People who have more joy, meaning, life satisfaction report all these positive benefits. They have more energy, they're more creative, they have more stable relationships, they're more able to lead, they're more charismatic, right? They're more able to get through difficulties. They're healthier, they live longer. There's just like all these benefits when people are thriving, right? That I think we intuitively know, but the research backs it, right? And so these efforts to thrive, they're not just kind of touchy-feely, it's not just a fantasy. Like, it really will improve the quality of our lives if those are outcomes that we value. So.
Hmm. Hmm. I want to pull us out of the book for just a second because this was on my itinerary for this conversation. And actually, I'll add one thing. I think you used a music metaphor to speak to what you just said, that the ensembles of perhaps instruments or whatever's generating the music, that speaks as well to this um, uh, what's the right word I'm looking for? But this
Harmony, or
yeah, exactly, the resonance and the harmony that's
resonance.
coming
Yeah.
together. Yeah, yeah. And so I like that music metaphor that you used in the book, that spoke to that. But yes, I'd like to extract ourselves from the book for a moment and speak to
Yeah.
you as the author of the book, and what was this. I'm always curious when authors birth a book or birth a thesis like this. And so could take us through, for whatever you're comfortable sharing, what
Mhm.
this was for you, what generative process occurred, what did you learn, and what was your overlapping, horizon broadening experience in this production of this book.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think for me, some of it was kind of wired in, just being a little more introverted, having a little more reactive, maybe central nervous system from birth, a little
Hmm.
more slow to warm up temperament. So some of it was, I was just born that way.
Okay.
Um, And then, with that, I think came a little more anxiety, a little more fear about, I was just very aware, I thought a lot. And so I was very concerned about what are they thinking about me? Am I performing? Am I succeeding? Am I good enough? Maybe in ways that other kids might never even pass their minds, right? And so, I think fear was a barrier. And there was a moment kind of as a young adult where I kind of, I had another epiphany where I realized if I value and this was with people, if I value others enough, that can conquer my fear. Like my valuing of them and wanting a relationship with them, wanting to be able to learn and contribute to their lives is sufficient to accept the risk that will take. And I got a taste of the reward of it. I had successful experiences where I just realized the richness of deeper relationships where I started being vulnerable, or I started opening up and not keeping that mask on, right? I think I mentioned as a kid, I wouldn't even smile in pictures because I just felt too vulnerable, I'm like, what will people think if I smile weird? And, it was just like overthinking in so many ways, right?
Yeah.
Can't even, now looking back, it's like, I don't know how, my mind was even going there, but yeah, like that vulnerability allows for emotional intimacy. It allows for these deep-seated needs to be met. It allows me to also contribute to people that I care about, that I want to help. And that really led me on the path to want to become a clinical psychologist. I'm a licensed psychologist now. I provide therapy, and I teach full-time, but provide therapy part-time. And I just saw how much that enhanced my life, how meaningful that was. Not that it's easy, extremely exacting, can be very exhausting, but just found deep meaning in it, and it enriched my life in a way that I wanted to continue. And so now, I still, to some extent, I'm an introvert, have that wiring where I'm still sometimes overly reactive to too much stimulation, but I have a justification now. I'm like, I could justify my suffering. I could justify the risks because of the reward and really the more of the meaning, the valuing that I assigned to that.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And so tangent alert. So,
yeah, it's okay.
Well, I think you'll enjoy this. About maybe last week I was watching a conversation between excuse me, Carl Friston, and then it was either Tomas Metzinger or Anil Seth or somebody who was like in neuroscience, and Friston's coming, I think, from neuropsychiatry. And Friston has this idea about the updating of priors, and so the Bayesian in the background, the Bayesian calculus that goes on in our sense making and our onboarding of this movement forward, the transcendence, the movement forward. And they were talking, and they went into a really nice flow state conversation about when this updating of priors gets stymied or hamstrung by, and it may be a cause and effect or vice versa, like depression and things like that. That disables the ability to update the priors. And so when I'm lensing that through overlap, I'm thinking that, so to the audience, there may be this inhibitory process that you may not have full control over. And so don't get frustrated if it, and so, but when they were talking, and I can send you the conversation because I think you might even enjoy it.
I would, yeah, please.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it was so neat. And anyway, but yeah, that comes to mind when we're talking about this. Where am I coming from? Am I an introverted person? And again, the canoe scale or the ocean scale, and what are my dispositions or my impulses or any of these things? So to the audience, this book is, and to go in a tangent within a tangent, the book is it is instructional, but it is also interactive, I think, if I could say that. I took away that I'm not being talked to, I'm being presented with information and ideas, and there were infographics in there that helped me with my ability to process the information well. There is no obtuse jargon in there. It's all very accessible. So that, to me, created a safe space of interaction with the work that Trevor did. And so that, again, in conjunction with the fact that you can tell yourself, well, if you're hitting walls and there's roadblocks in the way, that it's okay, and that this is a practice thing to move forward. So I'll hand that back to you. It's a long tangent, but yeah, just the idea, like if you feel like your wheels are spinning, that there are forces at work that that take some time and some patience, and that in itself is overlap. Like make that an overlap.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Absolutely. I think it's a really important point, because this is, like many things, one of those things that's like much easier said than done, right? And we do, I think of it almost like that invisible fence, where the dog has the collar on, and the moment they leave that invisible fence, they get shocked, and then that pulls them back. And our brain and body, to some extent, are designed that way. The moment we step out of our comfort zone, the body registers some stress, some new demand being placed upon us, and alarms go off. It's just like, we feel stressed, we feel anxious, and it's all about pull yourself back to homeostasis, to a nice even kill balance.
Okay.
And so we can, which is much of my life, I was just like, well, alarm's going off, pull back, don't talk to that person.
Right.
Don't
Bail,
do that
bail.
yeah, stay conservative. But if we can recognize that, I remember on social media there was something that said, here's your comfort zone, and then way over here is where the magic happens. And there's clearly a long distance between the two. And it's like, if we can have that mentality, it can help. And then we can have a new association, new relationship with that alarm. It's like, oh, that alarm is a good sign. That means I'm entering into the new. That means I'm potentially about to have an experience to overlap and enrich my life. And so I need to hear that alarm on a regular basis, or otherwise I'm staying too safely inside really my stagnant zone. It's not, even though if it's comfortable, it doesn't mean it's enjoyable. It can be very miserable, like almost like a prison, at some point if we stay there too long, which is what my life started to feel like. I just felt in prison, like I'm not having the relationships I want. I'm not able to do the things because I'm just always pulling back. And so, yeah, in the book, there is a whole chapter on what I call overlap dragons.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that because, in medieval lore, a dragon blocks the cave of treasures, right? And so these are things that block vitality from our lives, that get in the way, and we all have them, and there's a lot of them, and that's why we're not just overlapping like crazy. That's why we're not all like jumping and snorkeling, because things like fear of the unknown is very common. Most of us fear the dark. We fear what we don't understand. Shame. Sometimes we won't feel good enough or worthy. Inactivity, right? That can we're just too. I was talking to a friend just yesterday. He's like, we're just in such a comfortable society. We have comfortable couches, and we have comfort food, and we have easy access to entertainment. Everything's so comfortable that it's really easy to be inactive, and then we're not connecting with new things. Being too busy, right? We're also in a society where we can really not have time. Like we can just feel like, well, I would love to stop and talk to you, but I can't. I gotta rush on. So busyness. I actually my wife just the other day, I was on a phone call with her. Maybe I shouldn't disclose this over something that's public, but I think it's fine. And we were talking, and then she didn't hang up the conversation. So I was like, oh, it's just, I'll listen in a little longer, which maybe it wasn't appropriate, but it just sometimes it's sweet to hear, because she was with my daughter and they were talking, and it was just kind of fun to hear them talk. And then she parked and she was going to pick up my older daughter. And so she's told my younger daughter, okay, go in there and tell her we're here, we're ready to go. My younger daughter's like, well, why don't you come in with me? I'm like, normally you come in. She's like, well, I don't have time. I don't have time to talk to all these people. I know if I go in there, they'll want to talk, and then we'll be late for our next appointment, right? And so it was totally understandable that she would do that. But if we're too busy, then that can just happen all the time. Like we never have time to stop and overlap with living things. And so, sorry, I'd love to talk. I got to move on. And then we're malnourished, right? We're going through life without meeting our deep-seated psychological needs. Start to feel that. And sometimes it's shocking because we're like, why am I not more fulfilled? I'm doing all of these things, but if we're doing them at too fast of a pace, we can't absorb the goodness of those experiences. It's like having celiac disease and not being able to absorb the nourishment from the food, certain types of food. It's a problem where we are eating, we think we're consuming, but we're not benefiting. And so being too busy, getting depleted, right? There's a point where we could have 300 things in our backpack, but if that weighs 300 pounds, and then we're not enjoying the hike and the beautiful views. We're kind of dragging ourselves through the dust, and the same experiences are no longer fun. The same hike that could have been super amazing with 30 pounds, with 300 pounds, we're just too weighted down. Depression, right? Mental health issues can really be a barrier, significant anxiety. And sometimes those need professional help to allow us to then overlap again. And it took me a long time and some help to get past some of my barriers that, with my mental health. Self-absorption, right? If we're too self-focused, we don't look outside ourselves. And so we miss those opportunities to overlap with really valuable, amazing things right next door. Seeking too much pleasure, hate is a big barrier, right? Things we hate, we often, they're the out group, and we don't even try to connect, even though they may have amazing wisdom, love, kindness, richness to offer our lives. We can quickly draw circles that exclude huge groups of the entire population or the world even. And so that can start to narrow our ability to overlap. Addictions are huge, right? And there's a lot there that may need professional help too. Mindlessness, right? It's easy as we're busy or to kind of enter into this, automatized mode where we're not mindful enough to recognize that there even is a living thing there, to even notice, like, oh my goodness, like look at that sunset, or my goodness, look at, there's my dog. I just walked past my dog. Let me slow down and pet my dog and, give a hug and enjoy
Yeah.
the love that my dog, affection of my dog, and how excited my dog is to even see me. Like I missed all that when I was mindlessly just automatically walking past. And so those are a few of the dragons, but I guess I want to agree that absolutely many of these we may need help to overcome. You can't just snap your fingers and say, I'm just going to not be depressed anymore. It could take a lot of support.
Absolutely. And yeah, I don't think that could be overstated that this is such a but what I not that I am any great success in self-improvement, but what I enjoy when I do have my little breakthroughs or aha moments is that it paves a way it gives you a layer of confidence that you can look back on and say, okay, proof of concept, I've managed this. And for me, it's looking not for big victories. It's looking for those. I love the mundane, as I mentioned earlier, the transcendent for me has to be somewhat mundane. Okay, if you get the big one, that's great. But if you have these little movements through the psycho-emotional space and ecology of the psycho-emotional self, that should be sought. So I guess maybe that's an essentialist view that, just be grateful for the little things and forget pop self-help kind of stuff, just go for this like slow path, and when you bring up the dragons that, and you do a great job listing and identifying a lot, I have them all written down on my notes, and I'm like, that can't be overstated. And what was I going to say about your wife in the phone call? And yeah, like to me, and I think you already touched on this, that it's like that moment where there really isn't enough time to go in and kibitz for a while and talk to somebody. But then, like you said, you can fall into that pattern, and so this is the justification hypothesis or whatever you want to call it, where, what are your justifications in this, and are they in good faith to your development or to your socialization? So when you said that struck me, and I thought, oh, that's really cool. That we have to employ that caveat that is this a truly justified movement that I'm making or overture that I'm making in this decision process.
Yeah, you're right. And it's, and I think, I might get too idealistic in this because there are constraints, right? I mean, we only have so much time, energy. We can't overlap with everything, right? We'd never make it down the street if we stopped and climbed every tree and interacted with every dog and talked to every neighbor. And so we do have to kind of, make choices, be judicious about how and when. So it's not about always, it's just about, just being mindful and making sure we're dispersing it. I was talking to someone about this, and I'm like, well, how would I add anything more to my life? And I don't think overlap has to be adding anything more. I think it can just be like sprinkling the spice across everything, that we when we walk into work, maybe we do stop for a couple minutes and talk to the administrative assistant and check in and ask how their day is, and form a little bit of a relationship there. It doesn't have to take a really long time. Maybe at lunch we don't eat in our office. Sometimes we do go to the lunchroom and connect with our colleagues there. There's just kind of these, maybe at dinner we sit at that table with our family and we ask them some questions. We show some interest and curiosity, and we allow for something to happen there that we're maybe sitting there for the same amount of time, but sometimes we're just quickly eating our food and on our phone or reading the news, and we miss opportunities to overlap with more living things that are right there.
A question that's just popped into my mind very spontaneously is, so if you were to talk to a peer, a clinician, how can they unfold overlap into a practice? Do you see like a through way to where this can be picked up? And I'm asking this as a naive general audience guy. I have no idea about psychology. So is there a way for them to, other than reading your book and gleaning from that, but I mean, is there a means available that could be picked up as part of a clinician's toolkit to use?
Yeah, it's a great question. Absolutely. With depression, if we take that, there's already some approaches, and this is partly why, in my gathering of data, it pointed towards overlap, because there was already some interventions that kind of support movement towards overlap. And so one is called behavioral activation. When someone's depressed, often, if you think of like a painting that maybe a beautiful landscape, but down here in this corner is just a dark square, when they're depressed, their eye might be so close to that dark square that that's kind of all they're seeing. And now that's not just 10% of their
Oh,
landscape
yeah.
meaning of their life. Now it feels like 100%, And
Yeah.
so behavioral activation, there's some interventions where you try to help them think about, alternatives, see what else is going on in their life, not just the challenges and the distress, because our brain has this negativity bias. We do gravitate towards the biggest threat. But another way to do it is just through behavior. So if someone's mind is here in this corner to say, this week, even though none of these things are going to sound probably interesting, and you're going to be pretty convinced right now that none of them are going to help, we're going to try to do a few things you haven't done for a while. We're going to have you go to lunch with your friend. Let's organize for them to call you and pick you up. We're going to go bowling this week. We're going to do a couple things that used to be rewarding that no longer feel rewarding because the brain's so focused on ruminating in these neural pathways that are around stress and challenge. And when people physically move in those directions and do those activities, their brain goes with them, and their brain realizes, oh, there is more going on in my life that is actually enjoyable and rewarding beyond just that dark corner of all these really big trials or hardships. And so overlap, when people behaviorally activate and start to move and re-engage with things, that creates an opportunity to overlap. And when they're there at the bowling alley or at lunch, if they can then strive to overlap, that's going to be especially rewarding. And they're going to come back even more motivated to want to try that again. And it's going to overcome their current thinking that that's not worth it. It won't be fun anymore. They're going to realize, no, it actually was deeply nourishing. And I did meet some really significant psychological needs. And I'm going to try to do that again this week. Right. And then that starts a new cycle where now they're reawakening these neural pathways that have gone dormant because there was just too much rumination on just the dark stuff. And it's opening up their life to see the things back in perspective, that yes, we're not going to be naive and pretend like there aren't hardships and difficulties, but there's also this other 80% or 70% that's pretty phenomenal, and it's easier to accept and work on the hard parts when it's in the context of all the rest. That's pretty magnificent, actually.
I love that. And I love, so, and again, in my head, when you're talking, my images are popping in. And so I'm seeing the aperture analogy there. And I've heard it in other, and even in addiction, that reciprocal narrowing or the convergent focus on, like you said, that sort of little dark spot in the painting. And when the aperture when you can open up and reciprocally broaden, like you said, through novelty, through introduction of novel experience, so valuable. So I just wanted to echo that to the audience because, I mean, that is powerful stuff. And I don't know anything. And it's just, I can see it, I can see it being powerful. So
absolutely. Yeah. And that's, it's cool that, thinking about the aperture, I like that visual. I actually just went to a conference. It's the ABCT conference. It was up in Seattle, and I was listening to a presentation, and it's about a little bit, I guess it's newer in some way, a newer intervention called positive affect treatment. And what this is all about, and this also overlaps with overlap, but the theory behind it is that our brain has lots of systems. So it has two big systems, and one is the defense system that's to keep us safe and protect us. And so it sends out a lot of alarms, and it warns us when there's danger and stress. And so when people become depressed, that system can really get strong. And thank goodness we have that system. It has survival value, right? We need it. But it can kind of take over where that's like the only system that we're engaging with. And then everything's a threat. We're just on high alert all the time. And it just makes us want to pull back and retreat. And when we get depressed, we tend to become inactive, socially isolate. We're just kind of pulling back from life because it just seems too dark, too threatening. And so there's this whole other system. And some interventions are trying to directly, challenge and attack and weaken that system a bit. But there's a whole other system called the appetitive system or the approach system that's about seeking reward. And our brain has a lot of functions and neurotransmitters that allow us to seek things that are rewarding and nourishing. And that's a system that can really wither and almost die off when we get, extremely depressed. It's like, we have this powerful arm over here, but this arm is like completely withered and just not even being used anymore. And so some interventions like positive affect treatment are directly trying to strengthen that appetitive system. And there's multiple ways you can do it. Just like when we're depressed, we may worry about future things and then dread them when they're happening and then reflect on them as failures. Those three levels. Well, with positive affect treatment, what you're trying to do is you're trying to anticipate with excitement upcoming events, to like awaken that part of your brain that there could be something really positive, some really neat experience that I could have when I go to lunch with my friend. And like, what are the neat things we could talk about, and what could happen there, and what could I feel, and what could be enjoyable about that, and what could we eat, and what would that taste like, like anticipating
Mm.
and reawakening those neural pathways. And then the middle part is then why we're there savoring, right? And in the book, when I talk about the recipe for overlap, there is kind of some mindfulness pieces of that recipe, which are, not just opening up, but being able to let go of past, future, and to be present so that you can relish and savor and really bring your full attention, right, to that moment, to be curious and to learn and connect and, commune, you could say, with that other living thing. And so that's the second part of positive affect treatment is really bathing in that experience in the moment. And then the third part is then practicing reflecting back with gratitude, like recounting it with appreciation and reliving it, the positive aspects of, with PTSD, we relive the trauma over and over and over. Well, we can build the same ability to relive a nice experience, a positive experience over and over, and just glean a lot of joy from that, of laughing or looking at the pictures or reminiscing about like a really pleasant weekend with some friends or family. And so when people do that, and there's exercises to help them anticipate with excitement, to savor, bathe in the moment, and then to reflect with gratitude, it builds that system, and then it just becomes a little more balanced. They're not constantly entrapped in that defensive system. They have this approach appetitive system, and that allows them to start to go back out and experience life, and that fosters that overlap. And I think that a lot of those components are just part of the overlap recipe. So.
Wow. So much richness. Thank you for sharing that, because that strikes a chord with again, sense making and well-being and happiness. Now, how long has your book been out?
Since the summer. I think it was July, if I remember.
July. Okay. This is something I ask all of my authors who maybe they're memoirs and things like that, but books that will touch people's lives. Have you gotten any feedback? Are you getting any input on persons who have purchased the book, and what's that been like?
Yeah, it's been a fun process. I'm more of a clinician. I'm not really an author, so this is kind of something that for a long time I felt compelled to do, and I felt like there was value and it was worth sharing. But this has been kind of like a whole new world to write a book, edit it, typeset it. I decided through my research, I decided to self-publish. I just didn't really want to wait to get it out there. I may seek a publisher at some point, but and it's just so easy now to publish on Kindle Direct Publishing through Amazon, and then it just prints as ordered, and so it's really convenient. And you quickly do a Kindle and a paperback, and I have an audio will be coming. But but with that, I just learned that you also have to market a book, or no one will find out about it, because there's millions of books that it's buried underneath, and no one's going to even find it when they're searching unless you really put some effort into marketing. So that's kind of where I'm at now, is trying to get the word out there that I think there's substance in this, and people, if it fits their interests, I hope they'll find it beneficial. But it's been fun. Like, just locally, there's been some book clubs that have read it, and so it's been, and I've been able to join some of those and get some of their feedback. And some people love self-development, this genre, others not so much. But yeah, it's been neat, right, to hear some of the feedback of just some of the reflections, and while it's maybe a simple principle, the significant implications of that for our lives. And that's my hope, is that the book is kind of like a workbook, where there's these self-reflection questions with each chapter, some application challenges where you can actually overlap with the book and with the principles in it, and try it, apply it to your life, see if it's beneficial. And that's, I guess, the invite is see if it doesn't enrich your life, see if, one of the easiest ways to see if it's accurate or true is like apply it and see if it leads to results. Kind of that very pragmatic approach. And from my research and my personal experience, and those that I've seen incorporate these principles, confident that it can, if we can overcome those barriers to really do it. Right? We could go to lunch with a friend and be kind of checked out and on our phone and distracted, and it'd be like, that didn't do anything. Overlap doesn't work. But that wasn't really overlapping. Like, we didn't really put the phone down. We didn't look them in the eyes. We didn't practice empathy. We didn't express curiosity. We didn't learn much. We didn't give much. We didn't bond. Like, there wasn't that synergy that occurred. And so it's just kind of some of it's just practicing and like, how do I go a little deeper into this engagement? And, one example, again, I'm primarily using my own life, but thinking about putting my kids to bed at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
How easy it is to just pass by that, get home late from work. Oh, I'm late. My wife will take care of it, go to bed,
Mm-hmm.
and just miss any sort of connection. So passing, or I could kind of spectate and be like, kids are upstairs, just kind of watch them do their thing and notice, and, maybe they're doing some funny things or whatever. I'm just watching, or I could wade and I could go upstairs and, make a few comments and remind them to brush their teeth and say goodnight. And that could be it, and that would be something that'd be more substantive, or I could overlap, right? Where I could maybe organize my life a little better, get up there a little sooner, maybe spend a little bit of time with each kid, and take my youngest child and sit on the couch and put my arm around her and read her favorite book together and talk about what she learned, what she likes about the book, and check in on how her day was, who did she play with at recess, and what was fun, and what are her challenges, what's going well, and tuck her in, and take her little fingers and say 10 things I love about her with each finger. I love this about you, and I'm grateful for this, and thanks for the, and look in her eyes and really glean just, how beautiful she is, and just the cute comments, and how funny, and how witty she is, and just really have quite a moment. That same 5 minutes could be like energizing, and it could be significant, and it could be like something I look forward to all day, is like tucking my kids in.
Yeah.
If I have that mindset and I approach it with that overlapping mentality, or it could be something I miss, or that I resent, even if I approach it with the wrong attitude. And there was even research kind of backing this. Parents say, when they look at things that they enjoy most about parenting, there's a huge percentage of parents who say that reading their kid a bedtime story is one of their favorite parenting moments in a day. And so,
Oh,
yeah, like when we
yeah.
overlap, people recognize, no, it does bring joy.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's so cute. And I I'm again in my own head, that that connection with the other isn't uh, I could be wrong, but it seems like it's an overlap within an overlap. There's reverberance there. So it's a twofold overlapping, if that makes sense. Or I don't know how to frame that, but when you were talking about, how many ways I love you, or engaging in a story with them, or checking in with them, that they are then onboarding this care from another, that is making that connection. And so perhaps that's just overlap, but I'm almost thinking that there's a reverberancy in the overlap between two agents, between two souls that are engaging in that. And that to me almost makes another
Yeah.
kind of overlap, with it, or over overlap, or
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm loving that two people can overlap together, and it doesn't matter. There's no asymmetry there. I don't think, if it's good faith and it's positive, and seeking a good ends, a loving ends, that's so warm, and that can only help, especially with child development, and allowing a child with their attachment and introjection, like they're onboarding this method, not consciously necessarily, or at a level of sophistication that we could wait till later to talk about, what did you learn from this, but that it's just happening naturally. So that's so beautiful, so wonderful.
I appreciate you said, attachment there, because, we benefit, so much from overlap, but the person we overlap does just as much, from that nurturance we're providing, the support we're providing. And for kids, yeah, the attachment, that's maybe the most important part of their entire development, is the connection, the bond they have with their caretakers, to have that secure base, that reassurance, that stability. So much is modeled through that, how to be empathic, like how to connect emotionally to the person, which is going to help them in all the rest of their relationships, work and personally. And so it's quite a gift, right? We can give to our children to really strive to overlap with them, as we can, and to adults, to our colleagues, to other people. It can be one of the greatest gifts of all, perhaps, right?
Yeah.
To show that we value them enough to give them our true attention, which is really a sign of love. And Mr. Rogers at one point had a great quote, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but he said something like, "You're the most important person in the world to me right now, because I'm talking to you."
Yeah.
That was a level of attention and valuing and love he would give to anyone he talked to. And people felt it. I mean, there's a reason why he was like so popular. There's all these, documentaries being made about him still, and this is like low quality kids TV show, but
Yeah.
people built a genuineness from him, right?
Oh yeah.
It's different than other types of connection with people. Like he cared, like he was there and he was present. And with therapy, the same thing. Like they say, the therapeutic alliance is the strongest predictor of positive outcomes, more than the techniques we use, right? It's the
Okay.
bond, it's that they feel that there's empathy and there's genuineness and there's unconditional positive regard. That is so powerful. That's so transformative. It can lead to like emotionally corrective experiences if a genuine person really provides that, even if they're your therapist, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. As I said a moment ago, this conversation is very rich, and thank you. Yeah, just we're overlapping here. We're going deep into ideas of how can we navigate again, the ecology of the psycho-emotional self, and what we can onboard as a utility to be. I like to call it like an emotional hygiene, like that you can, and that could be judgmental, but it's that there is this self-care regiment going on, and I think this really what you're doing speaks to that kind of mindset where, obviously there are things like you said, the dragons that can really cloud and obfuscate these and we could speak to our intentions to move forward and to grow and to learn, but as you said earlier, it's a patience game. It's something that we have to work with, and again, that's what I love about the book, and you stated it yourself. It's simple, but in simplicity there is a level of effectiveness that cannot be obtained. So again, you could have been jargony, you could have been conceptual and propositional and having all these ideas that might shoot over our heads, but the way I think the way you packaged it and presented it is accessible, and that is a key, I think, in somebody having that support and that what am I thinking? Again, reciprocity, maybe that your book is reciprocating with that person, and that they can be in that reciprocation with them. What I would probably want to ask is in birthing this book and creating it, what has it done with your imagination for the future? I mean, now obviously it's in the nascent stages, and this book has just been out for a few months, but what do you see for the future of not only this book, but I think you mentioned what is it you said you were going to do in conjunction with this, or did you not say something and I'm just
Yeah, I mean, I have thought, it is a little bit of a longer book, I think there's a lot of space, for like reflection. And so, I mean, I think in some ways it doesn't take nearly as long to read as the pages,
Okay.
because it's more like, again, a workbook. But I have thought about, very interested in starting like a YouTube channel where I can just take small components, very digestible pieces, maybe 8 minutes worth, and just share that, right, in a way that's just accessible to everyone. You don't have to pay anything to watch YouTube, and then take another piece, and just so it can get out there freely and maybe even in a more accessible way. And I've thought maybe really cater into like youth, young adults, really that level, so
Okay.
that hopefully pretty much anyone looking for this could benefit. And that, yeah, that was the whole goal of this. Initially it was kind of, for me, is like, okay, what's just like a really simple way to figure out how to be a little more less miserable, a little more content each day.
Yeah.
And figuring out like maybe it's as simple as being able to tell someone, try to overlap a few more times, try to just
Yeah.
deeply engage with a few living things each day and see what that can do for you. As simple as that, and get some help to overcome any of the dragons that are getting in the way. And it's pretty much a guarantee, like life will get better. Sometimes if we're interpreting everything in really dark, negative ways, like even a beautiful experience can be turned dark. And so that's where, again, some professional help or feedback may be necessary so that you really can absorb the goodness of an experience without just seeing the biased or the more negative part. But I think if someone's not in that really dark place with how they're interpreting the world, most of these overlap experiences, we're going to be able to glean, from them. And so yeah, kind of going back to your question about clinicians or just friends or parents, your kid's struggling, to say, hey, what if we just set a goal? What if we try to overlap 3 times today? Find 3 living things, a pet, nature, a friend, see if you can overlap with them today. And and then you could talk about that at dinner time. How did your overlap go today? Who did you overlap?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
did you do to overlap? How did you ask some questions? Did you show some interest? Did you try to understand? Did you give something of yourself in that to lead to that deeper connection? And could really be, as simple as that, if we can, yeah, foster the courage to strive to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And when you spoke to YouTube, which I think is a great idea, I almost wonder if you could find an interesting way to get on or upload or produce a video where you have a conversation partner and demonstrate sort of in real time what overlapping is like between two persons. I mean, yeah, it's almost so ubiquitous or my word mundane that it may. I think it would land. I think it would work because again, I think anecdote and seeing examples of things is a great communicating tool or a great exchange tool for people. But
Great idea.
yeah, I don't know if that. Yeah, you would know how to do it. You would know how to do it. Yeah. But I think I'm just speaking as like I would be the observer. I'm the guy that shows up to YouTube, and I'm imagining that if I saw you engage with a person demonstrating or enacting the overlapping process in dialogue or in an exchange, that it would land with me. It would be a good heuristic or a tool, I think. So, not that I'm trying to feed you anything. It's
I
just
like that a lot. Yeah.
yeah. Because yeah, I had another author on this week and 32 vignettes, 32 little anecdotes from people's lives, and a lot of it was very tragic, but that they were stories of transcendence through coming out of tragedy with a good perspective. And for me, that is so powerful to immerse myself for the moment in someone's space and feel that and then pull back and I can't empathize. I'm fortunate that I can empathize
Yeah.
and experience that. So anyway, I'm rambling, but that would be neat if you do your YouTube channel. Yeah, maybe that would go.
Yeah.
What haven't we covered in this conversation that you would like to talk about before we start to, because I think we've actually been on for a little over an hour now. Time flies so fast.
Yes, wow.
Yeah, we're just a little over an hour. And we've given our audience a lot to digest. And I want, for those of you who are going to buy the book, that you discover and there's novelty and newness and so we're not covering everything in this. We couldn't cover everything. We'd have to have like a series of like 5 conversations to cover the entirety of your book. But let me ask you again, I'll reel myself back in. What would you like to leave the audience with, or what would you like as a last word relating to overlap?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's so, in the book I do go into a little more depth into like the recipe and, overlapping is the acronym. And so there's several, pieces of the recipe. It's a little bit of a longer recipe, but like, once you hear it, it's digestible, I think. And
Okay.
And so it's kind of like once we learn the recipe, we can just keep creating it, right? And it just becomes like second nature, and we just and the hope, right, is if there are some dragons, if there's some barriers to overlap, that we can just set a little goal and just work a little bit to get over maybe one of them at a time and just make it very reasonable. And the book's really designed to just read one chapter at a time, right? Even if it's a little bit longer book, just read one chapter, reflect on it a bit, try to apply it a little bit. Is there a dragon that you can kind of work on getting past or get some support with? And so it does become like a manageable process, and you start to get that reward. And then as you overlap a little bit deeper, you get a little more, right? It becomes maybe just one story to end with. And this was coming to mind when you were talking about kind of like the overlap with an overlap or kind of the reverberation, which is kind of this cool thing. And it's not, to me, it was really profound, even though in the maybe hearing it doesn't seem like that. But this is another time when I was putting my daughter to bed and I was initially downstairs and kind of tired, maybe a little bit grumpy, and kids are running around like, oh my goodness, I gotta go up there and they need an intervention to slow down and go to sleep. So I go up there and I probably had to like run her down and grab her, and put her under my arm to take her to the bathroom to brush her teeth. So I take her in and I put her on the counter and pull out the brush, and she's being kind of stubborn. She doesn't want to open her mouth. She's like 2.5 maybe.
Oh, okay.
And so, and I'm kind of grumpy and frustrated, like, come on, we got to get this done so I can get you to bed. And, but she's not willing to open the mouth. And so, I think I resorted to making some, distorted faces or some funny noises. And I know she grins and, smiles a little bit, and I get it in there and I start brushing. And then she starts making weird noises back, grunting or some Chewbacca-like noises maybe. So now I'm kind of laughing a little bit. It's just, and then we talk a little bit and we start to connect and things ease up, right? And my attitude shifts to like, this is fun to just be here with her for a minute and to connect with her. And as I'm brushing and I'm getting really, up there really close, there's light coming down from above us, and I'm just at just the right proximity. I've slowed down my day enough to kind of really look, and I realize like there's something in her eye, right? And I look closely, I'm like, oh my goodness, it's me. Like my reflection is right there on
Oh,
her pupil.
okay.
And it was just this moment of like, wow, like when I slow down, when I get close enough, when I really connect with my daughter, like I'm in her and she's in me. Like we're overlapping, like we've connected in this really cool way that most often I miss, when I'm just busy or distracted or going about. And this is special. This is something profound that I want to create more of, right? And so yeah, it was just kind of a moment of clarity where it reinforced this principle of there's something here, and
Wow.
this is yeah something to get out there.
Wow. Both a literal and metaphorical reflection. That's so cool to catch
Yeah,
that and then to hold that space for a moment. That's
yeah,
really neat. That's really neat. Trevor, we've had a really on my end, I think we've had a really neat conversation, really profound conversation, and all due to your having taken the time and the care for your fellow humans to publish this book, Overlap. And I will champion its success, and and by success I mean just touching lives and changing trajectories. I will really want to see that for your book and for you on your journey, wherever this goes. That I wish the best for you and your project and the book.
thank you, Justin. I really appreciate your questions, your comments, your insights, suggestions. It's really valuable. And again, this is really early for me, so I mean the feedback's super helpful
Yeah.
to think about in deeper ways and to consider the audience and how this can be helpful. And so thank you. Thanks for sharing your wisdom.
Oh, well, just just me ranting about it, going on my little tangents. But yeah, I appreciate that 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 you took that and that we could exchange. I'm in awe of what you did. And so if I could offer a little tiny sliver back, then that's really great. So I
Yeah,
appreciate that very much. And I would like to invite you back at some point, maybe late spring or something, and we can check in,
I'd love to.
see where things are progressing, and then keep talking about this overlap, because I don't think 1 hour or hour and 10 minutes does justice to what's going on. And what you do is grounding itself in my thesis and my project, that is to bring people on board to create a product that is this conversation that can go out in the world and have its own life and draw people to you, as well as just make people aware of potential uh, for positive change. So
Right, yeah.
I'm
Doing a
proud of
wonderful
what
thing.
yeah, I'm proud of what we did here. So thank you for that. Thanks for being a good conversation partner. I appreciate it. And
Appreciate it.
what I'll do is I'll say goodbye to you after I stop the record. But to the YouTube audience, thank you guys so very much for being here for this conversation. Check out Overlap. It will be available in audio format soon. I'll have means to access rather the book. And you have a website, right? So I can link that and get that information there. That'll all be down below in the description field. So again, YouTube audience, thank you guys so much for being
Thanks
here
all.
and observing the conversation. So let me find this recording button here. Okay.